Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayosritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Good evening and Namaste. I welcome you all in today's seminar in synthesizing Yoga, Tantra and Sankhyan thoughts. So next slide. So Swami Vivekananda, he does not require any introduction. So he is the chief disciple of Sri Ramakrishna of Dakshineshwar, and under his inspiration, he started Ramakrishna Math and Ramakrishna Mission, and with the motto that Atmana Mokshartham Jagat Hitaya Cha, for one's own salvation and for the welfare to the world. And how this welfare will take place and what is the form of the welfare. And that is that it is in the form of that feeling the oneness with that ultimate consciousness, that is knowing one's real nature, as well as for the upliftment of the whole society in terms of physical, mental, intellectual, and spiritual level. And that is to be done. The method is the combination of the 4 yogas, that is Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, and Raja Yoga. And today's my topic is on the Raja Yoga, why it is unique, and how that that Sankhya, Darsana, Yoga Darsana, and Tantra is combined together to elevate our consciousness. And Swamiji uniquely put that Raja Yoga in such a way so that everybody in the society can practice it. Now, first, let us look into the fact that why Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga is unique. So, it is the interpretation of that Yoga Sutra Patanjali. So Raja Yoga is nothing but interpretation of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and this Yoga Sutra Patanjali is based on Sankhya philosophy. And Swamiji introduced a bit of Tantra in it. So, it is a combination of Yoga, Sankhya philosophy, as well as Tantra. A bit of Tantra is there in it. And the second aspect of it is that it is the yoga of the mind. It is not Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga is generally related to that mainly to the prana and body. Of course, it takes care of that mind also. It talks of that that samadhi also. The goal of Hatha Yoga is Raja Yoga, but mainly in Raja Yoga or in that Ashtanga Yoga, it is also called Ashtanga Yoga as it is having 8 limbs. So it involves the mind and its purification. Purification is the mind is a very basic part, and Swamiji stressed on that also. He talked about the combination of the 4 yoga, especially Karma Yoga, and Karma Yoga is for purification. But in Raja Yoga also the purification part is there, because Raja Yoga deals with the mind and how to purify the mind by the means of Raja Yoga. And the second aspect of it is the concentration. Concentration means it is just putting the mind in one subject, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi, all put together in the term concentration. And the third aspect is that by concentrating on some tattvas, not on anything and everything, we have to put that concentration on particular tattva of the prakriti or consciousness to gain knowledge. So purification, concentration, and knowledge, these are the 3 main aspects of that Raja Yoga. And another aspect is that why it is unique, it is just useful for both Eastern and Western mindset. Generally, sometimes we find that that something is just fit for Eastern mindset. They are more tend to just believe in something. If you tell something, they will believe in something without just verifying it. It is mainly faith-based. Sometimes we call it as religion. But Western minds is something different. They are very much rational, and they will whether they see the result or not. But the Raja Yoga is such that people of that both mindset will have their satisfaction, because it is rational as well as that faith in terms of that God or that Guru. It is also there. And the another aspect is that Swamiji popularized his Raja Yoga in the Western world in the 19th century, 1895, 96, like that. He has just popularized this after 700 years. So in the 12th century, up to that, it was somehow, it was practiced in India to a great level. Afterwards, for the last 700 years, before 19th century, it was relatively become obscured. So Swamiji, he has popularized this yoga, Raja Yoga, and now it is in 20th century, it is very much popular nowadays. So he has popularized this Raja Yoga also. Now people are practicing it. And another aspect of, unique aspect of Raja Yoga is that it is a science, it's not simply a faith. So if it is science, means it follows some logic, it is having some method, and it can be verified, and it can be perceived. It's pratyaksha. Pratyaksha means that you can just know it by your senses. And it appeals to a rational mind, it follows the logic. So for this reason, Raja Yoga is also very unique. And another aspect that it includes that aspects of that Hatha and Tantra Yoga, Kriya Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and Dhyana Yoga. So in Raja Yoga, you will be finding that aspects of Tantra is there, Kriya Yoga is there, Tapasvata Pranayama Kriya Yoga, that is mentioned there. Somehow it will be related to that Karma Yoga, because lots of that physical karma as well as mental karmas are involved in that. Aspects of Bhakti Yoga is also there, Ishvara Parinidhanadva. So Ishvara Parinidhana, so that is, you are surrendering to Ishvara and showing him Bhakti. So Bhakti Yoga aspects is also there, though it is an alternative path. Though without Bhakti also, you can treat the path of that Raja Yoga. And it's called Ashtanga Yoga because it involves 8 limbs of yoga: Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. And it includes that Jnana Yoga also. And Jnana Yoga means that ultimate that consciousness which exists in this world. So how to know that one? So Jnana Yoga talks about those things, and here we see that with that meditation, when Jnana dawns upon that yogi at each level, especially in the first phase, Prakriti, Jnana about the Prakriti. So that is known to the yogi, and the last aspect of that reality, that is the consciousness, is also known to the yogi. So the Jnana Yoga aspect is also involved, and Jnana is the ultimate thing which gives that Kaivalya or Mukti. So Ajnana, it causes bondage, and that Jnana, that it gives Mukti. And another aspect is that Raja Yoga, it can be followed by people who is having emotional nature or mystic nature or rational nature, whatever may be, they can easily follow it. So in that way also, it makes Raja Yoga unique. And generally, Raja Yoga asks to practice its methods, experience the result, and then to believe it. Generally, in faith-based religion, it is seen that they ask you to do something without applying your logic, etc. But Raja Yoga tells that first you just follow the method, you do it, you experience it, and then believe it. If you don't really realize the truth, don't believe it. So in that sense, it is also very unique. And again, it empowers that yogi to become master of the nature. Master of the nature. Nature means that Prakriti 20, and it is having 24 tattvas. I will be coming afterwards. So the yogi can master over the nature. That means it can control. Generally, we are slave of the nature, and we feel we are limited and we are powerless. But a yogi who just knows that nature, the different tattvas of the nature, that he becomes master of the nature. So it is another unique thing that just before knowing that you are consciousness, before that also, when a yogi just focus on some tattvas and knows the tattva, so he can control the tattva, and in that sense he becomes master. So it empowers that human being to become master of the nature. Though the path is in a subjective way, science also controls the nature, but in objective way. But Raja Yoga, it controls the nature in a subjective way. The method and milestone of achievement in Raja Yoga are clearly delineated, and its practice is comparatively safe. So Raja Yoga practice in some path, we'll see that it is very difficult. Jnana Yoga is very difficult, and especially in case of Tantra, sometimes you will be finding that it is not safe. But in Raja Yoga, though it has the component of Tantra, but it is comparatively safe. And it transforms life. So the transformation of the consciousness, transformation of the life means all our the three bodies and the five that seats we are having. Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manamaya, Vijnana, Anandamaya, Kosha. So it gets transformed. And one can have that higher level of enjoyment, that subtle enjoyment. Generally, people are not having. They are having that maximum, they are having that gross level of enjoyment, but the subtle level of prakriti is there and enjoyment is also there. And that can be enjoyed by if somebody is just treading the path of this Raja Yoga. And the liberation, the Jivan Mukti, that means liberation while living, that is also possible in case of Raja Yoga. And now, just have an overview of Raja Yoga, that what it does. So first of all, it is telling that you practice that aspect of yama and niyama, that is some restrictions are there, that is the one has to practice in the form of that ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. These are the aspects of yama. And niyama is the saucha, santa, tapas, svadhyasya, pranidhana. So these are the aspects of niyama, these are the observances. So why one should practice these things? For the destruction or for the obliteration of the klesas, and affliction. Those gives us that pain. So those draws or the gross klesas in the form of sanskaras, those should be removed. And this gross sanskaras can be removed by practicing yama and niyama. Generally, it is having some beneficial effect on our that mind, and it takes our that mind, especially chitta bhumi, not only the conscious mind, our whole mind, conscious, subconscious, unconscious mind, the whole mind is called chitta bhumi. So it takes to the ekagra bhumi, and what is the characteristics of the ekagra bhumi? It is made up of that sattvic sanskara. And the second aspect of this Raja Yoga is that practice that one should practice that asana, pranayama, pratyahara, and kundalini yoga. That asana is for stilling the mind. If somebody has to still the mind, first of all, he has to still his prana, still his body. So the stilling the body is in the form of asana, sthirasukam asaram. Praitila saithalya ananta sapatibhyam tato danda anivigataha. So these are the different aspects of the asanas that is written in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. So asana is sthira and sukha. And that if your body is not still, that means your mind is also not still. So one has to still the body, and different types of asanas are there in Hatha Yoga. But here we are not focusing on different type of asana, only one asana, whatever is just suitable for you. You just choose that one, and so that you can sit in that asana for maybe 2 hours or more than that. And next aspect is the pranayama. It is related to the control of the prana in the form of breathing. So pranayama means control of the prana, simply not the controlling the breathing. Pranayama can happen also through manipulation of the physical body. That asanas also to some extent do some that effect on the control of pranayama. Through pranayama also you can just influence the prana, and through that mind also, through intellect also, through emotions also you can influence the prana. And pratyahara means withdrawal of the senses. So this is required in Raja Yoga before one go for that dharana and dhyana. And Kundalini Yoga is special aspect of that Swamiji has introduced in this Raja Yoga that is not mentioned in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And in Kundalini Yoga, what happens? That that power, Shakti, that is remaining, prana, that remaining in that Muladhara chakra, that base chakra. So that awakening the Kundalini. Shakti by special technique that Swamiji has talked about it, and Tantra is also it is there, in Hatha Yoga is also it is there. So that Kundalini Shakti has to be awakened and just move through that Sushumna canal, and it has to reach that Sahasrara. So one can realize that the Advaita state. And the next aspect of Raja Yoga is that practice of dharana and dhyana. So this is the that what is called that internal part of the sadhana, spiritual practice. And dharana means that desabandha chittasya dharana, that putting one's mind in a particular place, a particular object. And dhyana means tatra pratyaya ekatanata dhyanam, just having only one type of similar chitta vrittis per moment. Without any break. So that is that dhyana part. That is meditation. Dharana is concentration and dhyana is meditation. And the next part of that Raja Yoga is the practice of sampragyata samadhi. Sampragyata samadhi means one type of chitta vritti, sattvic chitta vritti would be there in the conscious mind, and one will be knowing that object of his contemplation properly. It is samyak jnanam without any doubt, and fully knowing that object may be gross, may be subtle. And that dharana, dhyana and samadhi together, it forms sanjama, and it helps to realize the gross and subtle tattvas of the prakritis. In that nature, it is having some gross prakriti that we are seeing outside, and it can be sensed by our five senses of perception. But apart from that, some subtle tattvas are also there. For example, that tanmatra is there, anu tanmatra, and that mind, gyanendriyas, karmendriyas, that ahankara, mahat, abhyakta prakriti. These are the subtle tattvas, and those can be known by focusing on that in the form of sanjama, which includes dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. And ultimately, when somebody knows that I am different from the prakriti and I am consciousness, so this knowledge is called viveka. It is a discernment between that prakriti and the purusha, so viveka jnana. So after having a sampragyata samadhi, completing the sampragyata samadhi, the last thing is that viveka jnana, establishing in viveka jnana, knowing that I am consciousness, I am different from that prakriti is inert. And all these things we are seeing, including our body, mind, intellect, everything, whatever we are seeing as an object or thinking that is an object. So that is prakriti, that is made up of three gunas, that is the observed, not the observer. That is the object, not the subject. So difference between the subject and object, that is the nitya and anitya, that is called viveka. So this knowledge, so in sampragyata samadhi, samadhi gives rise to knowledge. So the goal of the Raja Yoga is the knowledge. So it is sampragyata samadhi gives knowledge about the prakriti. That is 24 tattvas that we are getting, the knowledge we are getting through sampragyata samadhi. And the next stage is, the last stage is that even the yogi, of highest categories of the yogi, that the yogi is not satisfied with this viveka jnana, because viveka jnana is the product of that sattvika mind. So he is still under the control of the prakriti. Prakriti is three guna. Viveka jnana takes place in the sattva state of the mind. So he practices paravairaga, says he gives up that viveka jnana also, and at the time, what happens, there is no chitta vrittis in the conscious mind, and that is the state of sampragyata samadhi. Of course, at the time, sanskars are there in the subconscious mind, and this cessation of the all chitta vrittis, sarva chitta vritti nirodha, and tadadarshu swarupa avasthanam, the seers, the drashta, that jivatman, that remains in its own real nature, that is the nature of the consciousness, and here the jivatman is called the purusha. And now let us just so have an overview of what Raja Yoga talks about and how those are related to that the Tantra and the Sankhya. The goals of the Raja Yoga, the primary goals are to go beyond all kinds of suffering. Generally, philosophy, all our that six darsana, saradarsana, they are having almost this kind of that goal, that to go beyond all kinds of suffering, that pain we are having, and it is forever. Generally, science also removes pain and gives us that pleasure, but it is temporary in nature. But how to get that joy or that go beyond suffering? They are not talking about joy, go beyond suffering. So this is possible if somebody knows that I am consciousness, viveka jnana, and establishing viveka jnana, and knowing that I am that consciousness, and having or reaching the state of that swarupa avasthanam. So that is the goal of Raja Yoga, that is the goal of that Tantra also, and that is the goal of that Sankhya also. Generally, that Sankhya is the theory part, and that our Patanjali Yoga Sutra, Yoga Darsana, is the practical part, how to realize that even the different tattvas that is mentioned in Sankhya philosophy. And generally, that goal of Raja Yoga or Tantra or Sankhya. It is simply the knowledge, because the bondage that we are suffering, that gives rise to suffer, that bondage we are just having, that gives rise to this type of sufferings. And that suffering or bondage is due to the ignorance. And how to remove ignorance? By knowledge. And how to gain knowledge? By concentration. And what type of concentration? In the form of Dhyana, Dhyana and Samadhi. And these concentrations would be on the different type of tattvas that is mentioned, and the tattvas are at 25, that one has to know. And 24 tattvas related to the Prakriti, and one tattva that is related to the Purusa, the consciousness. Ultimately, one has to know the Purusa. But one may say, why we are bothered around 24 tattvas? Directly, we can go to the Purusa tattva. But it is not possible. Purusa tattva, first of all, it is very subtle. And the second thing is that it is not object, it is subject. First of all, we have to train our mind to focus on the gross nature or the gross Prakriti we are seeing around us, and gradually we have to go from gross to the subtle things of the Prakriti. And after knowing that one, and knowing is one form of enjoyment, after knowing that one, one develops that dispassion, and one gives up that one. If one does not give that particular tattva, after knowing that one, he will be remaining in that tattva. Of course, he will be enjoying some type of freedom, but not the total freedom. And it is the freedom from the sufferings, freedom from the Prakriti. Ignorance is the cause of all types of suffering. And the ignorance, it can be removed by the knowledge. And the goal of Raja Yoga, the main goal of Raja Yoga is to gain this knowledge of the Purusha, not knowledge of the Prakriti, but knowledge of the Prakriti is required before having that knowledge of the Purusha. And the third thing is that how to gain this knowledge. It can be gained by Samadhi, and to just have Viveka Khyati. So Viveka Khyati, it is the main thing that is mentioned in the Sankhya. Sankhya, Khyati means knowledge, and Viveka means that the discernment, that one can know what is the difference between that Purusha, that consciousness, and the inert Prakriti, and giving up that inert Prakriti. Generally, our body, mind, intellect, our Panchakosas, our three bodies, our gross, subtle, and causal bodies are inert thing made up of three gunas, made up of Prakriti. But generally, we think we are all these things. But experientially knowing that I am different from this gross Prakriti, I am consciousness. So that is Viveka Khyati. Simply theoretical knowledge, of course, it encourages one to practice yoga, but ultimately that experiential Viveka Khyati, it gives that freedom. And ultimately, I think the swasthya, the real state, the swastha state remaining in its own swarupa. That is mentioned in Yoga Sutra. And it is in the form of yoga, detachment from the Prakriti. Generally, we attach ourselves with the Prakriti in the form of I am body, I am mind, I am prana. So like that. So, of course, this attachment is in the form of the thoughts or thinking, wrong thinking. So the detachment with the Prakriti, especially I am not the buddhi, I am not the ego. So that detachment has to come through that knowledge, and that knowledge of Vivek Khyati comes through Samadhi, Asmitanugata Samadhi, and ultimately gaining absolute freedom from the Prakriti. So this is the primary goals of Raja Yoga. These are the primary goals of Raja Yoga, and the secondary goal is to have that health and well-being related to our gross and subtle bodies. So these are secondary goals, but these are also important as it gives Shraddha, that is developed Shraddha in the yogi. So he can pursue further goals that is mentioned in the primary goals. And what are the method used in Raja Yoga? So we can just divide the yogis in three categories: advanced type, the intermediate type, and the beginner's type. For the advanced type, generally that Sarva Chitta Vritti Nirodha is recommended by Yoga Sutra. And Yoga Sutra is a practical application to attain the goals of Sankhya Yoga. So, that Sarva Chitta Vritti Nirodha is possible through Asampragyata Samadhi. It is the cessation of the all mental modification, sarva chitta vritti nirodha, and tadadrashu sarvya avasthanam. That is for the advanced category of yogi. They should practice this type of thing, this type of yogic practice. And for the intermediate category, that they can attain the sampragyata samadhi, and through the practice of kriya yoga, that is mentioned in the sadhana pada. Tapas satyasya pradhani kriya yoga, tapasya, austerity, swadhyaya. That is that knowing the self through that's reading scriptures or by yapa. So that is swadhyaya. And Ishvara Paridharani, special devotion and self-surrender to God. So those are the Kriya Yoga practices, that intermediate category of yogi, that if he is not able to just have Sarva Chitta Vritti Nirodha, he can go for Sampragyata Samadhi. But generally, it is recommended that one should just go through the different limbs of that yoga that's mentioned in sequence, like Jama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dhyana, Dhyana, Samadhi, like that. And within that Samadhi part also, there is Vitarkanugata Samadhi, Vicharanugata Samadhi, that Anandanugata Samadhi, Asmita Anugata Samadhi. Those are the different categories of Samadhi, but one should practice in sequence. One should not first jump to the Asmita Anugata Samadhi. So it is very subtle. So the goal of the intermediate category of the yogis, they should just try to have that Sampragyata Samadhi, and afterwards, of course, they will have the higher category of that Samadhi, that's Asampragyata Samadhi. And for the beginners, Ashtanga Yoga is just recommended. They should practice that Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dhyana, Samadhi, the 8 limbs of yoga. They should practice. It does not mean that other yogis will be not practicing these things. They are also practicing, but they are established in all these things. So the higher part only that they have not achieved, they are practicing or focusing on that part only. Everybody has to practice that Ashtanga Yoga. But to the beginners, they must focus on the first part, the Vairanga part of the yoga, that Jama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, etc., and try to have concentration, dharana, up to dharana. Of course, concentration means dharana and samadhi, but first they should try to have concentration. Afterwards, they will go for that second level, intermediate level, in which they should try for Sampragyata Samadhi, and that afterwards, when they succeed in that one in Sampragyata Samadhi, they should try for a Sampragyata Samadhi. And generally, the 3 categories of the yogi, they will try to purify their mind and concentrate their mind and to have knowledge. But and this involves the Chitta Vritti Nirodha. But how it is possible? It is possible through Abhyasa practice. And practice means what? Practice of that concentration, Chitta Samadhana, that is Dhyana, Dhyana, Samadhi. And for that, Vairagya is also the second aspect that is very much required. Generally, Abhyasa helps in Vairagya, Vairagya helps in Abhyasa. If somebody have dispassion regarding that worldly things, that is Apara Vairagya. And Para Vairagya is one when that yogi is having that Vairagya or dispassion for the Viveka Khyati also, for the Sattva-guna also. Apara Vairagya is related to the Tamoguna and Rajoguna sanskaras or their enjoyment. And Para Vairagya is related to the Sattva-guna part. Sattva-guna aspects of the Prakriti. When a yogi gives us these 2 things, and giving up means how he's giving up, how he's just having dispassion for these tattvas, either gross or the subtle, because he's knowing this tattva, he's just and he's knowing that it is not that consciousness, it is inert or jara, and it binds me. And so he's just giving up that one, and he is going for some higher tattvas, very, very subtle tattvas. And another way of seeing that method that is used in Raja Yoga is whether they believe in God, a particular person, or aspirants believing in God, or he's a non-believer of God, or is some special category of yogi. So like that, from that point of view, those who don't believe in God. So Raja Yoga is a unique in that sense that it is just telling, of course, for them also the path is different. A particular aspect, he or she does not have to believe in God. And here God means Guru. He is not the creator. The creator is the Mahat, or the cosmic intelligence. And he has to believe in Guru or God. Generally, that yoga also gives another path. Ishvara Pranidhanatva, in which devotion to the Guru, it helps to attain Samadhi very quickly. So it is recommended for those who are having the devotional bent of mind to just practice the Ishvara Pranidhanatva. Klesa Kampavakasi Aparavishta Purusha Vishwa Ishvaraha Tatra Nirtisam Sarvajnatva Vijam. So regarding this that devotion to Ishvara, these things are talked about, in which it is told that he is a guru. He was never in bondage. He was always free, and he is always there to guide that aspirants who just seek his help. So Ishvara or Guru, so he is a tattva. So for the believers of God, they can follow Raja Yoga in this way. For the non-believers, they should follow Shraddha, Virja, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, Purvaki, Teresam. It is the major path. The path is there, that Ashtanga Yoga is there, but in that, the Shraddha is required. Shraddha is simply the reverential faith. That Virja, vigor, Smriti, that repeated recollection about one's own real nature. And Samadhi is absorption, Dharana and Samadhi together. And that Prajna, ultimately this Samadhi gives rise to Prajna. So here the goal of Raja Yoga is also the knowledge, and the knowledge can be attained by that Samadhi or concentration. By concentration we are gaining knowledge. Ekanva Darsanam, Khyatireva Darsanam. So in one way only that knowledge is possible. Khyati means that knowledge, and that is possible through concentration, through Chitta Vrittis. And when one is having concentrated Chitta Vrittis, one can have higher level of knowledge. So and the third categories of yogis, those are very special categories. They have practiced yoga, somehow they have stuck up in some path after just attaining some level of concentration. Maybe they have succeeded in Anandanukata Samadhi. Samadhis are of different types, Samprakata Samadhis, or maybe after just successful in Asmita Anukata Samadhi, Prakritilaya, they are successful in just knowing that I am different from that Prakriti, but they are thinking I am that object of Prakriti. So they become Prakritilaya, and that Videha means that type of gods. So they don't have the ego, I am the gross body, but they know that I am the subtle body and enjoy that one. They have succeeded in Anandanukata Samadhi, and they are enjoying that Anandanukata Samadhi. But they are having that latent impression, the sanskaras of ignorance in them. So after enjoying their prarabdha, they again come back to the world, and they have to also to start with that same Shraddha, Virja, etc. But they will start from the higher level. They have ended somewhere else, and from there they will again start. Generally, it is seen that from their part they are having the tendency towards Samadhi. So that is Bhavapartha Videha Praktilayanam. This is for the special type of yogis. And another thing is that in Sankhya as well as in yoga, the focus is main on Viveka Jnana. So Dhyana is a potent tool to just remove our ajnana. So in Raja Yoga or Patanjali Yoga Sutra, how to attain this Viveka Jnana, that is mentioned in details. That how to have that purification of the mind, and how to concentrate on the gross aspect and subtle aspects of the Prakriti. And with that, how to destroy Panchaklesas. And that Tantra aspect of the method that is used in Raja Yoga is to the arousal of the Kundalini Shakti that is there in the Muladhara Chakra, at the base of the spine, in the perineum region, in between that anus and the organ of our reproduction. So it has to be awakened by some special technique. And it has to, one has to take that Shakti through Susumna canal, piercing the sixth chakra, and just taking it to the Sahasrara, and one can have that feelings of Advaita. Generally, Sankhyan, Yoga, they are a dualistic philosophy. They don't believe in the Advaita, etc. They believe the two tattvas are there, Purus and Prakriti. But in case of the Tantra, the ultimate aim of Tantra is Advaita. And generally, when that Kundalini Shakti just meets that Shiva in the Sahasrara through the special technique, one can have the feelings of the Advaita. And that another aspect of that Raja Yoga is that Chitta Suddhi. Generally, we have to follow these three things. One is that Chitta Suddhi, purification of the mind, or Chitta Bhumi. We have to change our Chitta Bhumi from Vikshipta or Kshipta or Mura state to that Ekagra state, and ultimately going to the Niruddha state. And gross impurities can be cleared by practicing Vairanga sadhanas, Jama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Patthar, etc. The subtle impurities, whatever present, that can be just clarified by just practicing Dhyana and Samadhi. It will give rise to knowledge. And when knowledge will be dawned, then the sanskaras, these impurities are in the form of sanskaras, so they will be dissolved. And that subtlest impurities that are present there in the mind, because mind is made up of this vritti and sanskaras. So mind present means a certain amount of impurities will be there. And at certain stage, even that sattvic sanskaras will become impurities in a sense. And how to dissolve those things? By prataprasava, by dissolving that mind in the object prakriti, the unmanifested prakriti. So in this way, the three types of chitta suddhis one has to do in the path of Raja Yoga. And the second aspect is the samapatti, or the concentration. That is in the form of sampragyata samadhi, to know the 24 tattvas of the prakriti, and it is in the form of savitarka samapatti, nirvitarka samapatti, savichara, and nirvichara. And it is not possible here due to the limitation of the time to discuss all these things, but in different phases of samapattis, one can know the different tattvas, 24 tattvas of the prakriti, it can be known. And after knowing that one should have discussion, because those are the inner thing. I am consciousness, and I am just I am that all pervasive consciousness, and without any form of desire, etc. One knows that one, because desires, etc. are there in the mind, and mind is prakriti, and I am different from the prakriti. So when one knows those things, one can have that knowledge. So in prakriti, different type of knowledge are there. One become master of the prakriti with those knowledge. And when one knows that ultimate knowledge, that Purusha Jnana, when it is there, then one can have that kaivalya, or freedom. And what are the different features of synthesis that is mentioned in Raja Yoga? Generally, it is a synthesis, the combination of the Sankhya, mostly the Sankhya, that theory of that knowledge, or that reality that is taken in the yoga. So it is generally believed that the Sankhya is the theory part, and the yoga is that practical part of this. And those are allied together. Sankhya and Yoga Darsana are allied together. Those goes together. And to achieve that Viveka Jnana that is mentioned in the Sankhya, so yoga has given the different paths, and this Raja Yoga is nothing but 100% of this Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Of course, it is, and Patanjali Yoga Sutra is based on Sankhya. And the Tantra aspect, especially, not the whole Tantra. Tantra is a very big subject. Only the Kundalini aspect of the yoga is taken. Individually, each can take the sadhaka to the highest state, but this particular combination, it just accelerate the process of this evolution of consciousness, and to reach the highest truth. So why synthesis is required? Because first of all, it accesses the process of spiritual evolution. And the second thing is that the method of realization of Viveka Jnana mentioned in Sankhya is almost impossible for the average aspirant without the combination of practical step mentioned in the yoga. Viveka Jnana, how to attain that one? In Sankhya, of course, that path is given, and the method is there, is that one has to study, study or hear the scriptures, and second one has to have the reasoning, and third, in continuous meditation on the tattva will give rise to this Viveka Jnana. But it is for the highest level of yogis. For average yogis, that Sankhya Yoga is difficult. It's in one form of that Jnana Yoga. Of course, Jnana Yoga talks about Advaita, but Sankhya and Yoga both talks about that about the duality, Prakriti and Purusha. But still, that Sravan Mara Nidhyasana is mentioned in that Sankhya. But it is for the advanced type of yogi. And the second thing is that the use of prana, that our chitta vrittis are there. And when vrittis are there, some action is going on, that means prana is there, prana is involved. During Hatha Yoga, that prana is used to stop chitta vrittis, the mental modifications through kumbhaka. But in Raja Yoga, that prana in the form of mind, that is controlled by mental means. So these are differences. But management of pranayama yoga by practicing kumbhaka, pranayama is, of course, it is mentioned. Tasmin sasur gatir vichcheda pranayama, bhajyabhyantara, stambhavriti desa kala sankhavi, dirgha sukshma, like that. So bhajyabhyantara vishaksha vichatuttaha. So these are mentioned, and the goal of pranayama is that tatakshiyata prakasa avaranam. In one hand, it just stop the chitta vritti, and second hand, it is giving purification of the mind also. But kumbhaka is difficult for the average aspirant, and it is dangerous also. So what to do in this situation? So the huge energy that is remaining there in the Muladhara chakra, in the Kundalini, that is to be awakened and taken upward through the Susumna Nadi, piercing the 6 chakras and reaching the Sahasrara to experience the state of Advaita. Though it is very easy to talk like this, but it's very difficult to do. And generally, sometimes people are very much interested in Tantra, and they used to do, they try to attempt to awaken the Kundalini as such without practicing Yama Niyama, so that yoga and Tantra should go together. That if you are not purifying your mind and awakening your Kundalini, then you may face some mental problem. Then one may tell, then what is the need of that Sankhya? Yoga and then Tantra is sufficient. But that Viveka Jnana portion of the Sankhya is very important. Sankhya is not talking about siddhis, etc. Generally, you'll be finding lots of extraordinary powers. Siddhis are mentioned in Tantra as well as in that Raja Yoga or Patanjali Yoga Sutra. But those things are not there. Those are the obstacle to the path of Samadhi, ultimate knowledge. So if somebody stick to the Viveka Jnana, then one can easily reach the highest goal. So the combination of the three, both Tantra as well as Yoga as well as Sankhya, is very much conducive for an aspirant in this age. It is a very efficient and effective path, a combination of these three in Raja Yoga. And let us see what are the Sankhyan thoughts are there in Raja Yoga that one is using, because it is a synthesis of this Sankhya as well as Yoga as well as that Tantra. So Sankhya is Samyak Jnanam, that is the perfect knowledge of Tattvas and the 24 Tattvas of the Prakriti, and what are those Tattvas that is mentioned in the cosmology. And it is a Mahat, Abhyakta Prakriti. From Abhyakta Prakriti, Mahat is evolved from Mahat, Ahankara is evolved from Ahankara, that Pancha Jnanendriya, the organs of perception, Pancha Karmendriya, organs of actions are evolved, and from the tamasic part of the Ahankara, that Pancha Tanmatra, that Suksha Mahabhutas, those are evolved, and from Suksha Mahabhuta Tanmatra, Pancha Mahabhuta, gross world, that is evolved. So these are the tattvas, and generally, what is the usefulness of these tattvas? So when somebody just concentrates his mind, because one has to gain knowledge about these tattvas, what is this world? Only these 24 tattvas, and what is behind this wall that we are not seeing, but it's all pervading, that is the consciousness. So this Purus and the Prakriti. So Purus is one tattva, and 24 tattvas are the Prakriti tattvas. One has to know, and how to know through that concentration, and how concentration is possible through pratyahara, how pratyahara is possible through that pranayama and asanas, how and is that sufficient? No, yama niyam is required to give up that toss of the mind in the form of tamoguna, rajoguna sanskaras. Rajoguna was tossing of the mind, and tamoguna it covers that knowledge of the sattva. So it has to be removed by that yama and niyama. So the 8 that limbs that is mentioned in yoga, that is very, very important, and the cosmology part is used for that part of dhyana or meditation. And generally that Raja Yoga is interpretation of the yoga philosophy of Patanjali. It's called says for Sankhya also, because it believes in God, and God of course as a guru, and Sankhya is called Niriswara Sankhya. And that yoga philosophy of Patanjali is based upon Sankhya metaphysics. Metaphysics means that the nature of reality. And what is that nature? it believes in a duality. Purus and the Prakriti, two main tattvas are there, and Prakriti is divided into 24 tattvas. And it believes the theory of causation, Satkarya Vada, Karya Karana Sat, that effect is already there before it's manifested in the Karana, in the cause. Of course, it's believing Parinama Vada, actual transformation is taking place. For example, milk is transformed into that curd, so actual transformation. Here also the three gunas, ultimate constituent elements of the Prakritis. There is a Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So those are having Virupa Parinama. One is just dominating or being dominated by the others. And they are for giving rise to different type of tattas like Mahat, then Ahankara, then Gyanendriya, Karmendriya, mind, as well as Tanmatra and Mahabhutas. So these are used in case of yoga to have the reality. And in Satkarya Bhaja, we know that that every karya, every effect is having the cause in it. And what is the cause? Three gunas. So ultimately, if somebody just is focusing on any tattvas outside ourselves, as well as the mind, etc., one can reach up to that Abhyakta Prakriti. And when one knows Abhyakta Prakriti and giving up that Abhyakta Prakriti, then one can have that Sarva Chitta Vritti Nirodha, and at the time, one can realize one's own real nature, that is the nature of consciousness. For knowing consciousness, no Chitta Vritti is required. For knowing Prakriti, some Chitta Vrittis are of course required. Of course, Sattvic Chitta Vritti, because Sattva reveals. And another Sankhya thought is that Sankhya epistemology, theory of knowledge. And here the pramanas, that sources of that valid knowledge, prama. And what are the pramanas here? To have prama or knowledge, that Sankhya is talking about perception, pratyaksha, anumana, and agama. These three, pramana is there. Perception, we know we are seeing something, we are hearing something in which we are involving our senses. It is perceived by our senses, that is pratyaksha inference. Of course, we know what is the relationship between two things, and bhakti, we are knowing that one, and knowing one part of that one, we are just having that inference, and that we are using in our daily life. But what is agama, or that's a scriptural testimony, or the scriptural knowledge, or whatever the guru is telling? So, in fact, it is also that knowledge gained through that nirvichara samapatti, nirvichara vaisratya adhatma prasada. So, when one is having nirvichara samadhi, the highest level of that samapatti or samadhi, that time one is having that knowledge about that sukshma prakriti, subtle prakriti, and that cannot be perceived by our that gross or the gross that indriyas or senses, that organ of perception. So those are known by the mind, by the very subtle mind, sukshma mind, sattvika mind, and that is also perceived. But for that beginners or that intermediate categories of sadhakas, it appears to them that somebody is telling that one. But those are also some perception, higher level of perception. And Sankhya and Yoga both using these three pramanas to know, because to have pramana, to have knowledge. So knowledge is that breaks the bondage. And how to have knowledge of prama? Knowledge means prama, through pramana. And what are the pramanas? These three pramanas are just mentioned in Sankhya as well as Yoga. And what is the form of, then again is the liberation or kaivalya, that we are suffering due to ignorance, and this ignorance gives rise to samjoga, union between the Purus and Prakriti in the form of ego, and that ego is to be destroyed by Viveka Khyati, Viveka Jnana, and know one's own real nature. And the experiential Viveka Jnana, not theoretical reading, is achieved by that studying, hearing scripture, reasoning, and constant meditating on the truth, that I am the consciousness. So that is mentioned in Sankhya Yoga. And also, of course, how to achieve that Viveka Jnana, because it requires purification of the mind, and the detailed path is given in that Patanjali Yoga Sutra or in Raja Yoga. And the experiential knowledge of the Purusa leads to the Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti. Jivan Mukti means when one is having this physical body and knowing that I am consciousness, that is that state of Jivan Mukti. And Videha Mukti means one is not having the gross as well as that subtle body, and one remaining in state of that I am consciousness. So that is Videha Mukti. So of course, these two, that concept is taken in yoga also. It is mentioned in Sankhya but yogis also use these two things, and Tantra also, they are talking about this mukti, etc. And classical Sankhya, Nirasara Sankhya does not believe in creator God, and that is the only point of difference between the Sankhya, classical Sankhya, and the Yoga. Yoga believes in God, but not the creator God. It is in the form of Guru. Sa Purvasava Guru, Kalana Navacheda, he is the ultimate Guru. And Yoga thoughts in Sankhya Yoga, I will go a little bit fast because time is less. So Swamiji tells that Aphorism Patanjali are the highest authoritative textbook of Raja Yoga, and it is a practical handbook to attain Viveka and liberation. And in Samadhi Pada, the philosophy of that yoga and how to attain the highest is mentioned there. And that Ishvara Paridhana, this is the alternative path, is also given those ones who that treat the path of Bhakti Yoga. So they can follow this special path, that Ishvara Paridhana, devotion to God and self-surrender. In Sadhana Pada, details of that path, that Kriya Yoga, what are the klesas, etc., and Jama Niyama, Asana Pranayama, Pratyahara, up to Pratyahara, it is mentioned in Sadhana Pada. And in case of Vibhuti Pada, simply the extraordinary power is mentioned here. How to attain those extraordinary power? By knowledge. How to gain knowledge? By Dharana and Samadhi. And not individually. One has to put this Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi involving the conscious, that subconscious and unconscious mind, and the whole mind will become super conscious. And that light of Sanjama should be put on particular tattva, maybe 24 Prakriti tattva, and ultimately the Purusha tattva. Purusha tattva, one does not have to have Sanjama, because when one gives us all those things, one knows that I am the Purusha. So Sanjama is required to know the Prakriti tattvas. And after knowing that one has to give up those things, because those are the inert thing, and I am consciousness and nothing to do with inertness. So when one develops this type of that knowledge, one has dispassion. And Sanjama gives us different types of that supernatural powers. Generally, those are obstacles, but those are the milestones also. And sometimes that yogis, they get that enthusiasm after attaining those powers. But those are not for enjoyment, because that enjoyment is a product of ignorance. And in Kaivalya Pada, the rest of the things, whatever not mentioned in that Samadhi Pada, those are mentioned here in case of Kaivalya Pada. But in Vibhuti Pada, one can see that up to Kaivalya it is mentioned there. And Yoga Sutra, in the light of Vyasa Vasa, of course, one has to just study that Yoga Sutra, which are very terse in nature. And after studying that one can have that extended knowledge about the mind. Mind means not only the conscious mind. And we know that from Mahat, everything is created. And what is Mahat? The cosmic intelligence. So the Chitta, the Mana, Buddhi, Ahankara, that whatever may be, the whole thing is created from that Mahat, the cosmic mind. And that whole, that mind, its dynamics, function powers, and freedom from the Prakriti, one can get it if somebody reads that Yoga Sutra or the Raja Yoga of Swamiji. And the Sankhya philosophy is excellent for the advanced category of yogi. But the Yoga Sutra or the Raja Yoga is comfortable. One can feel easy to deal with Raja Yoga, especially if he's a beginner or intermediate or advanced, whatever maybe. One can follow that Raja Yoga. And another good thing about that Raja Yoga is that it is not telling the world is false like Advaita Vedanta. Of course, it is saying that it is having that Vyavaharik Satta. Empirical truth is there, but it is not the ultimate truth. But yoga is telling that two real tattvas are there, and the world is parinama, actual change of the three gunas in different combination. It becomes, certainly become crosser. So one does not have to think about or break his head about whether world is false or not. So world is there, and just know what is its real nature by purifying the mind, by concentration and having the knowledge. And of course, one can have that results of vibhutis that gives that yogi that enthusiasm, and the remedies for that physical, mental, and intellectual health problem, whatever may be there, it can be dealt with in Raja Yoga by Ekatattva Abhyasa, Vyadhi, Dhyana, Sankhya, Pramada, Alasya, Vriti, Bhrantu, Darsana, Dvimikatana, Vistitana, Chikti, Viksavati, Antaraya, Dukkha, Dharma, Changamecha, Sasa, Pasasa, Vikshepa, Sahuva. This type of different types of physical diseases, mental diseases, and other type of diseases are mentioned there, and which are obstacles in the path of that Samadhi. So how to remove those one? Ekatattva Abhyasa. So just focusing on one tattva. So that is mentioned there. So the solution of the different types of our that Vyadhi, Adhi, Sara, three types of problems related to our gross body, our mind, as well as our intellect. So those are mentioned in Raja Yoga. And another thing is it is not harmful, it is all auspicious. And the Tantra aspect of yoga is that Swamiji has introduced that Tantric Kundalini awakening technique only, not the all full of Tantra. So Tantra that includes that, of course, that Jnana, Dhyana, then Charja, Kriya, etc. But only the Tantric Kundalini awakening aspect, that is also mentioned in Hatha Yoga also, that Swamiji has taken that one. And I told that to accelerate the process of that knowing the highest truth. And it is supplement to the pranayama. Pranayama generally deals with that conscious or subconscious mind, that the energy is that is remaining there in the conscious subconscious mind. But in case of that Kundalini awakening, the whole prana, the remaining there in the base of the human body in the Muladhara chakra, and that unconscious that mind and the prana that is there, that is to be awakened by special technique. And the technique is the practice of pranayama and the control through the practice of pranayama. Pranayama is not simply the breath control, but this is the first step, control of the breathing, inhaling and exhaling through both the nostrils, that left and right. Left is related to the Ida, right is just related to the Pingala, and Pingala is the sympathetic nervous system, and the Ida is the parasympathetic nervous system. So when those are balanced, and the Ida is related to the mind, Pingala is related to the prana, when those are balanced, and at the state that through special kriya, that Kundalini to be awakened. But this pranayama first starts with that breathing part. Second, by just having mindfulness of the breathing, one can control the nerve currents also in the physical body. After that, after just controlling the nerve currents, one should go on controlling the thought currents. And after controlling the thought currents, one should go to control the prana. And the prana is just controlling everything in this world. This world is nothing but the interaction between the akas and the prana. And if somebody can control the prana, and it is very subtle, that's why we started with the gross. And generally from the gross, that breathing part, we're going to the nerve current part. And from nerve current part, we're going to the thought current, and ultimately going to the prana. And if somebody controls the prana, one can control the nature. Nature is nothing that internal, external, only one nature is there. We are dividing it as internal, external. And when somebody controls prana, one can know the prakriti, because one can easily have that concentration. Because prana causes the tossing of the mind. And if somebody can just have control of the prana, one can easily control that the chitta vrittis. And one can have only one chitta vritti of one tattva, one sattvic tattva, and one can know the prakriti. And ultimately it leads to the knowledge of the Purusha also. And that another aspect of Tantra is that one has to practice some rhythmic pranayama. Swami just in detail mentioned that one. That first rhythmic pranayama, anulam viloma pranayama, like that. One has to practice for some time. After that, one should just have rhythmic pranayama with chanting of Om. And the third part is that one can have that Nadi Suddhi pranayama in the form of that inhalation, exhalation, that Puraka, Kumbhaka, and Rechaka. That inhalation, then retention and exhalation of that prana, that the Vayu, that the breathing. And it is Antaka Kumbhaka based pranayama. Of course, it is difficult. One should not practice directly to this ratio 1:2 1:4:2 ratio, and with that starting with that 4 seconds for inhalation. So one should start with that 4:4 like that, 1:1 ratio. And afterwards, one can go with that Bhaja Kumbhaka also. Same thing that one has to do. But what is that Antaka Kumbhaka? What is the technique? The technique is that with Onkara, one has to inhale through the Ida, and then one has to visualize. Some visualization technique is there. That is very important. And through visualization technique, one has to just force that prana vayu. It is not the ear. One force the prana vayu, and with visual, and one has to visualize that it is striking on that Muladhara chakra, the Kundalini, and one has to think that it has been awakened. And afterwards, while exhalation, one should think that one is taking that pranavayu from through that Pingala Nadi, which is right side of our that vertebral column of the Susumna. Susumna is the middle, left side is Ida, right side is Pingala. So through that one has to exhale outside. And again, one has to just inhale from the right nostril, that is through the Pingala, and the visualization technique will go on, but it's a little bit difficult. The same thing with Bajya Kumbhaka. Bajya Kumbhaka means you are exhaling and stopping. Retention is outside. Inside your lungs, air is very less. So that is Bajya Kumbhaka, and the rest of the things, that is the ratio is almost same. And what it does, it purification of the nerves is developed, and gigantic willpower is developed. Because this type of that pranayama, it causes that mental paramanu, that subtle elements of the mind to align together, and it's formed like a battery, like electricity, something like that. And it develops gigantic willpower. And that willpower with visualization one should use to awaken the kundalini through the Sushumna Nari, and take it to the different chakras. And when one reaches a particular chakra, and what are those chakras? That Muladhara chakra, Swadhisthana chakra, Manipura chakra, from lower to up. Muladhara chakra, then Swadhisthana, then Manipura, then Anahata in the heart region, and in the Kantapupa, there is Visuddha chakra, and that in between two eyebrows, Agya chakra, and of the head there is Sahasrara chakra is there, and Shiva is there. And Tantra, it talks that one has to awaken the Kundalini and take it to the Shiva, that is residing in the Sahasrara chakra, and one can feel that Advaita. But it is only possible when there is a balance between the Ida and Pingala, that sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and through special technique, the Omkara and some other also mantras are there, and that is secret. And those things are just applied to have some kriya to awaken the Kundalini through the Sushumna and reach that Shiva, and unite with the Shiva. So union of the Shiva and Shakti. So that is mentioned here in Tantra, and one can have that knowledge of the Prakriti also at the different chakra level. And ultimately, when it reaches that Sahasrara, one can have that knowledge, I am that Purusha. So that part is integrated in that Raja Yoga. And now let us just summarize the whole thing. So Raja Yoga is a science, it's based on experience, and it is a Guru Parampara, that means it is peer reviewed, and one can become master of the nature, and one can free from all suffering. So that is the goal of our human life. So we are getting all these through Raja Yoga. And Patanjali Yoga is the highest authority and textbook on Raja Yoga, so I'm just telling this thing. And Patanjali Yoga is based upon the system of the Sankhya. That for the theory part is totally depending, it's some little differences. It is depending on the Sankhya. Raja Yoga or the Patanjali Yoga Sutra is depending on the Sankhya for its theory part. And Raja Yoga teaches us the different aspects of the mind, how to control the mind, how to concentrate the mind, and to develop the willpower. And that willpower is used for meditation or for awakening the Kundalini. And ultimately, through that Samadhi, one can have that knowledge, Jnana, and which gives us freedom. In Sampradaya Samadhi, one gains the knowledge about the Prakriti or different tattvas, and one gets partial freedom. In Asampradaya Samadhi, one gets the total freedom by having the knowledge of the Purusha. And the tattvas mentioned in the Sankhya and Yoga are used as object of concentration to have tattva jnana. So the cosmology, if you study the cosmology, so we know that if that creation has taken place in certain direction, we have to go to the opposite direction. The Pratipasha or Laya of the mind, by knowing that Suksma tattvas in sequence. We start from Gras tattva, and we have to know that subtle tattvas of the Prakriti. And those tattvas are mentioned in Sankhya and in Yoga. And Sankhya cosmology is used to make those tattvas as our object of concentration. And Viveka Khyati, of course, it is mentioned both in the Sankhya and Yoga. That is very important. And Viveka is required. In Tantra also, Viveka is always required. And Tantra is not for that sense enjoyment. It is for renunciation only and knowing the highest. And here the only one part of the Tantra, the Kundalini Tantra, is used to just handle the prana that is already inside us. Everything is inside us. We are potentially divine. And the goal is to manifest the divinity within by controlling nature. By that combination of any yoga Swamiji is mentioning. And here we are talking about Raja Yoga. Of course, it is having that parts of that Kriya Yoga, that Bhakti Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, Raja Yoga, all 4 parts are already one can have in this Raja Yoga technique.